part 2 of our 3-part series is going to be for the 7M here. We did standard to about 400 wheel horsepower, and we're going to be covering that 400 to 600 wheel range today with this next step. So this list, this is basically just the budget to pull the number on the dyno. This isn't the budget to put it down on the track, and this isn't the budget to, you know, ultimately having a well-rounded street car. This is basically just to pull the number. You're still gonna need tires. You're still gonna need, you know, hopefully a brake upgrade to slow you down once you've, you know, flexed this 600 wheel-ish, stuff like that, right? So keep that in mind. This is not a complete car. This is, you're just pulling a number, and that's it. So you decide on your own kind of ultimately what's important to you. So if you wanna build a factory looking Mark III and pull these numbers on a dyno, then in my opinion this list will get you to 600 wheelish. Just like the last video, it gets you to that 400 wheelish for sure. So it's up to you guys. So let me start off with this, with your ignition setup. And your stock ignition setup is fairly, you know, terrible by today's standards, but you know, it's I've seen people pull 500 plus on the dyno with a factory ignition setup. Okay, so I mean, it can be done. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but what I would change to go to the next level would probably just be an efficiency upgrade more than anything, is the Lexus IS300 coil pack. So it's a waste spark setup similar to your factory setup. You don't need 2 igniters. It runs on all your factory electronics and stuff like that. You just simply extend your coil harness plugs, plug them into the IS300 units, run your spark plug to the additional cylinders. We'll cover all that stuff in depth in another video, but that's what I do. And gap the plugs down. Factory, I think it's 0.031 is what they're gapped to. You want to be looking for 0.025, something like that. That's what mine are gapped to. They're just cheap coppers, and you know, they hold north of 1,000 just fine, so you should be just fine as well. Second thing is second Walbro 450. So we're going to add another in-tank pump. It's up to you to decide how you want to mount it. You can go to, you know, Supra store if you want and spend, you know, 300 bucks on a fancy, you know, triple aluminum pump hanger or whatever you want to do. I'm not going to recommend the, you know, metal worm gear clamp method where you clamp the 2 pumps together, but that's for you to decide. So with 2 pumps, and we're going to demand more out of the car in terms of injector. I'd recommend 1,000 cc injector personally for this. You could run larger. I wouldn't run any smaller than 1,000. We're over pumped for, I think, 600 wheel, and I'd like to be over injected personally. That's what I'd recommend anyway. So, you know, a set of 1000s and an adjustable fuel pressure reg. You can't just drop in a set of 1000s and run them on base fuel pressure. You'll just flood your motor, so don't do that. Second note on the pumps is this is where we're going to get to a standalone. So ideally between yourself and your tuner, decide how you're going to stage that second pump. So if, you know, if your car is going to see, you know, 5 pounds of boost, if you can use that as to trigger your second pump, then, you know, perfect, whatever. You just don't want them both running at the same time. what's going to happen if you run them at the same time is, I'll tell you, for the people that might not, that might overlook this, is fuel pump running in your tank, actually it creates heat, right? So cold fuel, warm fuel pump, imagine every liter you send to the fuel rail that's not being, you know, sent through the injectors is coming back in a return. So every loop it makes, it just gets a little warmer and a little warmer and a little warmer, and two pumps running, it's just going to expedite that. So, I mean, you know, it's not ideal. So that's why we want to look at staging the pumps. You can do it without staging the pumps, yeah. But I would recommend that you stage your pumps. So you got your fuel, you got your ignition set up, so sort of, you know, a little more ready for the increased demand. Standalone time, basically. So Drift Motion has AEM EMS V2 with a harness to go from the standalone to your original harness. $1,300, take your pick. Yellow plug, gray plug. Yellow plug ECUs, for those that are unclear on that, are 88 and older cars. Gray plug are 89 and newer cars. Be careful which one you order. That's something you need to know when you order. Otherwise, you're going to get the wrong harness. And allocate about $500 for additional sensors, right? It's not going to come with absolutely everything. You know, you need to have, you know, your boost control sensors. You need to have, you know, vacuum line for that. You need to have map sensor. Ideally a spare map sensor, IAT sensor, spare IAT sensor, etc., etc. So allocate about $500 for, you know, additional sensors and stuff like that. And you can talk about that with your tuner as well. Sometimes they have their own recommendations. Tuning. So you have your AEM, you have all your boost control solenoid, you have all your sensors. Tuning's kind of the one thing that I left no budget on here. It's subjective. You know, I know a lot of guys that just might want to take it to the dyno and just make a 650 or a 675 horsepower hit and just let their car live at that. But if you want, like, you know, a lower stress, you know, 450, 500 horsepower tune, and you want to be able to switch maps to, you know, your 700 or 650 tune, then, you know, that's up to you. Also, you're going to have other things like boost per gear available, and your two-step or your launch control, you know, no lift shift, stuff like that. So, you know, that's why I didn't leave a budget for that. It's going to depend on how far you want to go and what features you want set up and how you want it all tuned. Ultimately, how long it's going to take on the dyno and stuff like that, it's all up to you. Why I chose AEM. I chose AEM because no matter where you live, near or far to you, at that most local dyno shop to you, there's going to be somebody there that has had background with AEM stuff. It's very nearly the industry standard. It's available anywhere. You're well catered to for availability of product, and ultimately people that are versed in the AEM language. So I chose AEM so you guys would have support available to you. It's not the best out there. It's not the most expensive out there. It's not the cheapest out there. You're right in the middle. It's a good product. Don't let anybody tell you it's not. I mean, they're in as many cars as they are because it's a good product. That's why I chose AEM. And stock intake manifold, I wanted to touch on this as well. I see a lot of guys go to front-facing intake manifold with, you know, like a small turbo and stuff like that. I mean, You know, yeah, it's a personal preference. You like the way it looks. It looks tough. I mean, it makes your engine look like it's a 1,000 horsepower 7M. I mean, it looks cool, reminiscent to the JZs, and that seems to be cool, I guess. But you can make 600-700 on a factory intake manifold setup. No problem whatsoever. I mean, you could go as far as port matching the intake manifold on the upper and the lower piece, port match it to the head, you know, and polish the internal runner. I mean, you can do all that stuff. And I would, just because that's who I am and I can't leave anything alone. So, I mean, it's easy to take the material off and it's hard to put it back on. That's a joke because you can't put it back on. So, take your time. If you're going to take some off, do it slowly, check your fit. Take a little more off, check your fit. Once those tolerances start to tighten up, just work on your polishing from there. And a Q45 throttle body, that's the only used part that I added into this second part of this 3-part 7M type series. It's a 3-inch throttle body. There's one on my car. It flows to well over 1,000 horsepower. Even when you go front facing intake manifold, you don't need another throttle body. They're $50 shipped anywhere from a wrecker or from a buddy. You can find them anywhere. That's the only used part here. And the last thing, there's 2 more things. I'm going to get to your meth kit first. AEM is what I'd recommend. There is all sorts, Snow Performance and, you know, whatever. They all have a pretty good product. I like the AEM stuff. I mean, that's what's in my car, and I've not had a problem. It's available on Drift Motion as well. The difference between the kits in terms of AEM stuff, I believe you can only get the V2 kit now, which is their later, this is their revised version. The old V1 kits were a little bit different. There's a V2 in my car. So it's going to come with a pump, your tank, which is the only difference between the kits, Lion, and a nozzle. And basically a 500, 750, 1000 cc nozzle. You can get whatever size tank you want. I wouldn't put a 5-gallon meth tank in the back of my car just because it's going to take up the room and it's probably going to look silly. So, I mean, I'm fine with a small tank. I top it up every time before I take the car out. That's all there is. So, having a standalone in the car now, AEM is going to come with a kit, a little rotary dial and stuff like that. It's basically going to tell the pump when to come on. You can have your tuner set up your pump to come on when it hits X amount of boost, whatever. 5 pounds of boost triggers the pump. Done deal. I'd personally mount that nozzle into the throttle body. A lot of people do it into the intercooler pipe, but intercooler pipes are really thin, and I wouldn't want to risk a boost leak there. I mean, it's already a super thin pipe. I'd honestly drill the throttle body and secure it into the throttle body. And I'd probably put the 750cc nozzle in there just to start. If your tuner wants to change the nozzle size based on your car or how you want it tuned, then that's a different story, but I'd probably start right in the middle. And it's worth noting now that I don't want anybody to tune their car with maximum horsepower in mind on meth. It's got a good cooling effect to the cylinders. It lowers IATs like mad, that's why. Keeps the insides of the engine clean. You know, there's all these benefits. Yes, it adds octane. So you're juicing up your pump gas. Some of you guys get worse gas than others, and not to, you know, point fingers at other states, but, and I know my friends are some of my friends are watching right now, but you guys in California have the worst fuel in the world. I mean, you fill your tank, and by the end of the week, the stuff's foul. So, more so for you guys, tune with, you know, be conservative. You know, I wouldn't want you to tune your car. Yeah, it adds octane. You can, you know, pull more timing and stuff like that. But I don't want you putting all the timing you can into your car, you know, with, you know, fresh fuel in there, and your meth's coming on just fine. What happens if you get bad gas? I mean, you know, there's got to be some safety net there, and that's what I think the methanol's ideal for you guys, is adding a little safety net to your pump gas tune. You never know how good or how bad the fuel quality is going to be. So don't push your car too hard on it. And you can't tell me that with a single nozzle in the throttle body, you have equal amounts of methanol flowing into each individual runner. You can't. You're going to have hot and cold cylinders. There's going to be a difference between them. You're going to melt one of them. Don't be that guy. Leave some on the table, be conservative, make good power for a long time, especially with cast pistons. You know, we're doing this on the factory, you know, your engine's unopened besides doing the, you know, head gasket basically. So, you know, be careful. Their cast pistons are fragile to heat, and they won't put up with detonation at all. So don't push it, I'm telling you. And clutch. ACT makes one. I saw on Drift Motion's website. It's a stage 4 6-puck unit. And they're claiming it holds 630 and change as far as torque. So you'd be well north of 750 before you touch that torque figure. So you're over clutched, like you're kind of over fueled. And that's good. It'll last for a long time. Break it in, follow the break-in procedure properly, and you won't have any problems when you're doing the clutch. If you're not going to replace the flywheel, have it resurfaced at the minimum. New flywheel bolts, ARP. Done. Don't reuse flywheel bolts. I mean, when a flywheel comes off at RPM, it's a saw. So, new hardware, please, new hardware. And that's that. You know, I had a couple of friends of mine, you know, when I was trying to put this list together, I bounced some ideas off them, and they were like, oh, what about the oil pump? What about the oil pump? The oil pump would be just fine at 600. You know, I've seen these cars pull 790s plus out of the factory unopened engine besides a head gasket. Big turbo, lots of boost, and careful tuning. Ultimately, it's up to you guys. You could build your motor before you get to this level, just with reliability in mind. You could order a shimmed oil pump from Aaron, and you could replace the factory oil pickup tube, the crush bent factory one, with one from Arizona Performance. Drift Motion sells them. You go right to ARZ Performance, get one there. Don't put a braided line in your sump though. We want to keep, you know, metal out of there. I mean, should there be some little bits when they assembled the line and, you know, come out? I mean, you just want to keep oil out of your oil. Sorry, you want to keep metal out of your oil pan, so don't put a braided line in there, please. And that's that. I mean, this list, let your tuner play with it. That 67mm from Drift Motion should see you to, you know, you're going to be north of 25 pounds probably. I mean, make sure your meth kit's working, make sure it's coming on. Be conservative with your timing, and that's fine. If you want to leave it around, if you want to have it set up for, you know, 11.5, you know, to 1 AFRs, you watch that number. I mean, it's conservative and it's safe. Don't put a bunch of timing into it. It'll last for a long time, I'm sure. And just be mindful, right? I mean, you know, have those fail-safes set up in your ECU. I mean, you know, if it starts to see knock, I mean, you know, IATs get super hot, you know what I mean? There's all sorts of fail-safes available, and that's something you need to have a conversation with your tuner about. There are other ways to get to that 600 wheel mark. Honestly, this might be going too far for a lot of people. Maybe you're not comfortable to push your motor that far, especially being not built. You don't have to go this far. Don't get me wrong here, we've probably spent you know, 4,000 bucks thereabouts, maybe a little bit more on this second part here. But that's gonna see you to 600 wheel-ish. I'm gonna say, you know, mid 600 wheel pretty reliably. Some of you guys may get adventurous and want to go a little bit more, and that's fine. I mean, if you got the budget, if you plan on building your motor anyway, yeah, push it a little bit harder if you want. See what you can get out of it. I mean, there's no harm in that. You want to be a little conservative too. Maybe you don't have the budget to build your motor right away, then fine. That's cool too. If you want to do this list, cool. You could certainly stop at like 550 wheel, and you know, basically all I'd add from our first part to this would be the meth kit clutch. I would still do the AEM and I'd still have it tuned. So I'd still do your standalone, do your clutch, fuel injectors, and the meth kit. Have it tuned. And, you know, I mean, you could look at 5.5 reliable for a super long time. Just kind of depends how far you want to go. Again, this is, I'm not saying this is the way you need to build your car. This is, if I was trying to be on a budget, this is kind of what I came up with to get to 400 wheel, 600 plus. And in the next video, we'll go for that 1,000 mark that seems to be elusive to many people. Don't get me wrong though, that's kind of where we throw the budget out, and that's that really. I mean, all bets are off on, you know, your transmission, your diff, your, you know, everything. Your bottom end, all budgets aside, I mean, all bets are off. Even built motors, they can fail at 1,000. Built motors can fail at 600, it doesn't matter. So that's where all bets off, and that's where all budgets kind of thrown out the window. In terms of being budget orientated, in my 1,000 horsepower recipe, I did touch on the necessities to get there, not necessarily all the accessories. So, still kind of trying to be a little light in the budget. But I'll get back to you guys with that 1,000 horsepower recipe next time. See ya.